Thank you. I apologize for being late. I had confirmation at the cathedral and it went over time. So I was not able to get here on time without getting a speeding ticket. So, gentlemen, good afternoon. I hope things have gone well so far today. Have they? Yes. Good. It's good to hear. Good to hear. I was asked to say a few things about the very difficult and painful subject of the sexual abuse crisis. And I'm going to make a number of comments, and then I will open it to you for any questions or comments that you might have. Also, if you have any ideas that we can add to what we are already doing, I would be happy to hear them from you. The sexual abuse crisis is a moral, psychological, and criminal problem. When someone abuses a child, that behavior is contrary to the moral law. It is a sign of serious psychological problem, and it is criminal. And in the past, oftentimes in the church, there was an understanding of the moral and at times the psychological, but sometimes not the criminal side of this. It is criminal behavior, plain and simple. It is a problem in society. We see this problem in the church writ large, but we also see it in things such as the entertainment industry, in businesses. Almost every day, someone in the public is removed or suspended because of inappropriate behavior. It may not be with a minor, but it is still inappropriate because it puts pressure on someone, oftentimes with adults concerning a woman. It puts pressure on that woman to respond sexually as a means of moving forward. This issue brings a great deal of shame to the church. We're not going to talk about the entertainment industry today, we're going to talk about the church. It is shameful, it is embarrassing, and it is angering. I am very disappointed with brother priests, brother bishops, who have not handled this the way it should be handled. And it's more than disappointment because lives have been damaged. There are some who have gone through this very, very difficult experience and have been unharmed. I know people who have called me and said, Father so-and-so did this to me in the sacristy 50 years ago. And when I talk to the person and I ask them, how can I help you? The response sometimes is, I'm fine. I don't need anything. I've gone on with my life, but I felt that you should know about this. Other people, their lives are destroyed. I spoke to a man sitting in my office 2 weeks ago, 53 years old. He's in tears because a priest behaved inappropriately with him. He has long felt the guilt. He has long felt that he somehow brought this on, and it has made it very difficult for him to maintain relationships, and he's now concerned about how he can best relate to his own children because he feels that he has kept them at a distance when he should be much closer to them. And it's because of this incident which occurred 43 years ago. In the past, when situations like this came up, they were handled generally in a very quiet way. The person was either moved or the person was sent for therapy. The psychiatrist working with the person would say he's now ready to go back into ministry, usually in a different venue. And that's where you have that destructive pattern of priests being moved from one parish to another with nothing being said about why the person is being moved. Approximately 1985 is when the American Psychiatric Association began to understand this problem of pedophilia, which is, of course, sexual activity with someone who is below the age of puberty, and ephebophilia, which is sexual activity with someone above the age of puberty, so mostly teenagers. Around 1985, the American Psychiatric Association came to the conclusion that this could not be cured. It could be managed. And as a result, they changed many of their instructions to psychiatrists on how to deal with this problem. But it was the Boston Globe in 1998 and 1999 which brought this out into the public view in its series of articles complaining about the way the church in Boston had handled this, and especially the way Cardinal Bernard Law had handled these cases. As a result of the Boston Globe article and other articles that were commissioned by various newspapers, which brought this issue to the fore, the American bishops gathered in 2001 and 2002 and developed what became known as the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. It was promulgated in June of 2002 with the approval of the Vatican. The focus was on priests who had offended in this way. Unfortunately, in the charter, there were no measures established for the accountability or for the discipline of bishops who covered up abuse. The assumption was that bishops did not engage in this behavior themselves, but that some had behaved inappropriately in terms of trying to hide this and not report this to the civil authorities and follow through on what needed to be done. At the same time as the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People was promulgated for the Church in the United States, there was a change in seminary formation. Much more care was given to the psychological process of accepting a young man for the seminary, making sure that as best as we could tell, there were no problems, no psychological lacuna in the person's background. So seminary formation changed. There was also, by the way, an investigation, a visitation of American seminaries to try to get a better understanding of what was going on in the seminaries, and that was instituted by the Vatican to try to improve our seminaries. As a result of the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People, there was a dramatic drop in the number of cases that surfaced of inappropriate behavior with minors. So after about 2005, the status quo became that every diocese was to establish a review board, and I'll get to that in a moment, and that there would be periodic checks of every diocese to make sure that the diocese was following the directives that were outlined in the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. The next big thing to happen was the Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report, which showed two interesting things. First of all, it showed that a large number of priests had behaved inappropriately with minors over the last 50 years. One thing it showed, which didn't get much press, is that only 4 priests in the Pennsylvania study, 4, had behaved inappropriately with minors since the institution of the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. Somehow that didn't make CNN or Fox News. There was a lot of criticism of the church and a lot of well-deserved criticism, but what was interesting was that whereas the case in 2000 focused on priests, the Pennsylvania Grand Jury Report focused on bishops. It shifted because what was pointed out in that report was that many bishops in Pennsylvania knew what was going on and did not take the appropriate action at the appropriate time. So there was a shift in focus, and the fact that the vast majority of the cases brought up in the Pennsylvania report had occurred 40, 50, 60 years ago, and 4 had occurred after the charter. Now, in the midst of all of this, as the U.S. bishops are trying to grapple with this, and bishops around the world, it's important to point out that we as American Catholics can be very proud of the fact that we're leading the charge. Many other countries simply don't have the procedures that we have in place, or are asking us to look at our procedures so that they can put them in place. They really have nothing in place. The Italian bishops have just begun that process of putting together procedures. The French bishops are doing the same thing. The bishops of England and Scotland and Wales, a little bit ahead. The Canadian bishops, a little bit ahead. But we are the ones who have been sharing with the world how we feel it is best to handle these horrific situations. Let me take a moment to explain to you, as members of the Diocese of Youngstown, and those of you who are not from the Diocese of Youngstown, you're certainly most welcome. Let me just take a moment to explain what we're doing here in our diocese. These procedures that I talked about, but they apply to priests, deacons, sisters, or lay church workers. Here, I am only going to refer to priests just for the sake of brevity, but this does apply to everybody else. Bishop Malone and Bishop Tobin were both ahead of the curve and took this problem very seriously and took the right action to remove people from ministry who had behaved in an inappropriate way. They also worked with seminary rectors, as I have been working with them since I've been in the diocese, to ensure that we are accepting the right people for the seminary and that their background checks have been done sufficiently so that we have a very insightful view of the person before they get going. And by the way, sidebar here, we have and should be proud of the fact that we have 19 men in the seminary. That is the largest number of seminarians that we've had since the year 2000. Now, I would like you to pray because 3 men have applied for the seminary for next year, and there are 2 more who are discerning. So we could have as many as 5 next year. And my goal is to get the number of seminarians up to 30. So I need your prayers to encourage some of you and to encourage other men in our diocese to choose the priesthood and be of service to the wider church. Now, when an allegation comes in, it usually comes with a phone call, or from a phone call, to use the right preposition there. An allegation, when it arrives in my office or the office for the Vicar for Clergy or the Chancellor's office, is immediately, within 24 hours, reported to the civil authorities. At the same time, we immediately convene the Diocesan Review Board. The Diocesan Review Board is made up of doctors, lawyers, mental health professionals, parents, child services representatives, representatives from the children's services departments in every one of our 6 counties, religious women, a deacon, and a Protestant minister. The role of the review board is to review the information about the allegation and to make a recommendation to me about whether that priest should be removed from ministry. Every allegation is taken seriously and the Vatican is informed. When an allegation comes in, unless the allegation is completely non-credible. Now, by that I mean, if an allegation comes in and says, Father Smith behaved inappropriately with me at St. Raphael's Parish. Well, we don't have a St. Raphael's Parish. So we have to look into that right away, and we sometimes find out that the person making the allegation, we send the person a picture of the priest that they're talking about. Sometimes they'll call back and say, oh, that's not the priest I met. And then we have to try and track down who the person is. But as soon as we get an allegation, the priest is placed on administrative leave and may not function publicly as a priest. Now, I want to be very careful on this because I've said this a number of times and it still seems to cause confusion. Unless instructed not to do so by the civil authorities, we conduct an investigation utilizing the services of a private investigation firm made up of former FBI agents. Now, exactly why that gets confusing, or when I get comments back, people seem to not understand that. There are times when the county prosecutor's office, we contact them, turn the case over to them, and the county prosecutor's office will say at times, please do not investigate this yourself. We want to do this on our own so that there's no opportunity for jury tampering or no opportunity for intimidating witnesses. Because sometimes when someone finds out that they've been accused, sometimes their family starts calling people and saying, did you make this accusation against Father so-and-so? Most times, the county prosecutor's offices do not tell us to not investigate it on our own. They do their investigation, we do ours, we exchange information. So there's a constant flow of information back and forth. But there are cases where the county prosecutor will request of us not to investigate this on our own. Unless the county prosecutor says that, we do our own investigation, which parallels the county prosecutor's investigation. If the priest, when confronted, admits the offense, he is permanently removed from ministry and encouraged to leave the priesthood. If the priest does not admit the offense, the investigation by the former FBI agents is completed and a report is given to the review board, made up of those various people that I mentioned to you a moment ago. They, in turn, after examining the facts in the case, make a recommendation to me about whether, in their judgment, the allegation is credible, meaning, is it more than likely? Is there evidence that indicates that this, in fact, happened? If the allegation is credible, then I permanently remove the priest from ministry, meaning that he may not function as a priest and may not celebrate any sacraments, may not present himself in public as a priest, and may not wear a Roman collar. He may celebrate, according to church law, he may celebrate a private mass, which means with no member of the faithful present in his room by himself. No one can be present for that private mass. The other thing a priest may do is hear the confession of a person who is in imminent danger of death when no other priest is available. Those are the only two things that someone can do who's been removed from ministry. The judgment of the review board, which is passed on to me, and then my decision is made public, first to the parish or the school or whatever community the priest served in, and then to the general public. Victims are immediately contacted and offered counseling and whatever support they may need with, for example, medication. Every victim is invited to meet with me personally. Many decide that removing the priest is sufficient. Some have met with me, some have not, but they're all invited to meet with me. Now, in terms of keeping children safe, what do we do in the present and going into the future? First of all, we have not received any contemporary allegations since 1998. The allegations that we have received have all referred to something that happened before 1998. After 1998, there have no allegations have come in. Safe environment programs are up and running in every school, religious education program, and parish. Anyone, including the school janitor, anyone who works with children must participate in the Virtus Safe Environment Program and complete that program, which requires monthly going onto the internet and reading an article about child abuse and then responding to questions. Some people have refused to do that. Those who have refused to do that no longer work in our institutions. We have to do everything to protect children. Secondly, 5 years ago, I invited a retired judge to come in and review all of our files. Everything was presented to him that we have, and I asked him to find if there were any holes in what we had done that needed to be taken care of, or were there any problems. He, in writing, said to me that in his judgment, there were no problems in the Diocese of Youngstown. Each year, we review the policies of our diocese, and an independent auditing firm reviews our policies on site every 3 years. That firm comes, goes through all of our files, talks to priests, talks to pastors, talks to principals, religious education directors, and then gives a public report, which we print in the Exponent, with their report that we are either compliant or not compliant with the Charter for the Protection of Children and Young People. Every year, I'm happy to say we have been completely compliant with the Charter. All of the county prosecutors have been invited to come in and review our files on sexual abuse. To date, 2 have accepted the invitation, the others have not. And they've simply said, I don't see any reason to come in and review the files. But 2, because there were a number of priests in their counties, 2 asked us if they could come in at my invitation to review our files. And I said to them, you see these things on the news of different states, the Attorney General or some other legal person raiding the offices of the Chancery, and they're all there in riot gear and black masks and high-powered rifles and everything. I said to each of the county prosecutors, there's absolutely no need for you to do that. If you want to do that just for show, go ahead. But there's no need, because if you just tell me when you want to come in and see the files, you can come. It's not a problem. So 2 have come and looked through the files and have informed us that they don't see a problem. The State Attorney General, Mike DeWine, who is now the governor, sent representatives from his office to review the files of all the dioceses in Ohio. And the review from the state's office was very positive. They did not see any problems with the way these cases were being handled. We are in the process of expanding our review board to include lay professionals who can help us to deal with allegations of inappropriate behavior between a priest, deacon, or religious and either a consenting or non-consenting adult. To date, we've been dealing mostly, not entirely, but mostly with allegations against minors. But we do on occasion get allegations from someone who says that a priest behaved inappropriately with him or her as an adult. And sometimes that was consensual, sometimes it was not. We have to look into that because all of us as priests have made either a vow or a promise of celibacy, and we need to hold to that in order to be men of integrity and not be walking around living double lives. Also, the new review board will be able to receive allegations against past or against the present bishop. Bishops have to be included in this. Bishops, we cannot exclude ourselves from this process and again, maintain integrity. So the expanded review board will also receive allegations against bishops. The key to all of this is victims first. So often there was great concern for the priests, but not very much concern for the victims. We have to put the victims first because they are the people who have suffered through this, many of them for a very long time, sometimes for 30, 40, or 50 years. So victims are our first concern and the first concern of the review board. At the same time, we want to be fair to a priest who is accused. Just because someone is accused does not mean that person is guilty. That's why we do a thorough investigation to determine exactly what happened. But if the priest has behaved in an inappropriate way, he has to be accountable, and the bishop must be accountable and must take action as soon as possible. The only way to solve this problem is by constant vigilance. Other groups have become much more aware of this problem in our country. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. Recently, you saw things in the paper about the Baptist Church also taking on this issue. Many, many groups are looking at this, but there are also many groups that are ignoring it. And we are in the forefront of handling this and being public about it. I do not know another group of people in the United States who have been so upfront about handling this noxious problem. But we have to do it because a child must be safe in any of our institutions, and not only children, but adults. A priest, a brother, a sister, a church worker has no right to impose themselves sexually or even psychologically on another person. We all need to be vigilant, not only the people who work at the Chancery office, but all of you. All of us need to work together to ensure the safety of our children and remove this terrible stain from the good name of the Catholic Church. Thank you very much for listening, and I would be very happy to take any of your questions, ideas, or comments.